A Sunday school teacher asked her children as they were on their way to the church service, "And why is it necessary to be quiet in church?" And bright little Sally, 6 years old, said, "Because there are people sleeping in there." Well, I certainly don't want to put you to sleep today. But this month, I have been concentrating on the need for us to go more into the silence and to be more and do less. But this doesn't mean going to sleep, and it doesn't mean spacing out, and it doesn't mean going unconscious. It actually means quite the opposite. It means going within and becoming more aware. It means being super conscious. This week, I'd like to expand on the subject of being more and doing less, and to talk about what this being state actually looks like. To many people, especially Buddhists and unity people, this being state is often meditation, and that is great. But today, I'd like to zero in specifically on prayer as a method of being and not doing. Now, at this time of year, as I'm sure you all have noticed, in the subtropics of New Orleans, we often hear the statement, "Thank God for central air conditioning." But as important as central air conditioning is to us, there is something that is far, far more important for our well-being, regardless of the weather, regardless of the time of year, regardless of where you're living, and that is central prayer conditioning. Now, central prayer conditioning means that we condition our life in prayer. We condition our whole life in prayer. There are many options, of course, on the spiritual path, as we all know here at Unity. But I believe there's one thing that is not optional, and that is prayer. We can pray in our own way, of course. We can call it meditation. We can call it many different things. But in order to experience the real life of spirit, prayer is absolutely essential. To condition our life in prayer means that we make prayer central in our life. That's why we call it central prayer conditioning. To make prayer central in our life means that we pray daily. It's something that we do perhaps hourly, perhaps even momently. To make prayer central in our life means to make prayer the very foundation, the very basis of our whole life. The way we speak and think and do and have our being. So, what is this central prayer conditioning really? In order to develop the idea further, let's first talk about some of the conventional ideas out there about prayer, some of the thoughts that our culture, our society generally holds about prayer. Many people tend to think of prayer as a sort of spiritual fire extinguisher, something that's to be used for emergencies only. When all else fails, what do? We pray. Many people become so accustomed to using prayer in emergencies that anytime they pray, their unconscious response is, "What's wrong?" Imagine that you're in an airplane and the pilot suddenly comes on and he says, "Okay, folks, it's, I think, time to begin praying." What would be your response? Probably, "My God, are we about to crash?" And the reason that response is automatically evoked in us, with many of us anyway, is the assumption that if it's time to pray, we must be in dire straits. Something must be really wrong. Or someone says to you, "Will you pray for John for the next few days?" What are we tempted to say? "Well, what's wrong with John?" The assumption is that if everything were okay, prayer wouldn't really be needed. I mention this to point out the attitude that in our society, in general, we have, many of us, perhaps to a lesser degree around here, this very feeling. Prayer, of course, we know at Unity, is not a fix-it. It's not a spiritual fire extinguisher. Prayer needs to be the very foundation, the central part of our life. Central prayer conditioning is praying first, not only praying when things go wrong, but praying when things go right, praying all the time, praying as a way of life. It's almost like a walking meditation, being in a state of prayer. So what is prayer, you might ask? To illustrate Unity's concept of prayer, let's first look at the more conventional viewpoint. In conventional theology, God is up there somewhere in heaven, and we are down here, these lowly beings on earth. So prayer is like a long-distance phone call, right? Calling God, here I am down here, God. Do you hear me? Do you hear me? Over, God, I've got a problem. Can you help me? Can you fix it for me? Can you take time out of your very, very busy schedule to help me with my problem? Often, that is the sort of thought that is implicit in much of prayer. It's what has come out of traditional Christianity. There's a great emphasis on supplication, almost pleading. In fact, some prayers even resort to flattery. We flatter God. If we butter God up, maybe he'll do a special favor for us. Oh God, who are almighty and merciful, creator of heaven and earth, I am but a poor sinner down here. Please have mercy on me. Sometimes prayers are downright bribes. Dear God, if I pass my final exams, I'll go to church every single Sunday this year. Or if the problem works out and I get this girl or this guy, I promise I'll read that Bible every single day. This is a caricature, of course, especially around here at Unity, but I'm making the point that if you look at many of the assumptions underlying conventional prayer, you will see the mental attitude of trying to manipulate God, trying to get God to do something for us. The Unity viewpoint of prayer is considerably different because in Unity, we don't an the cosmology of God way up there in heaven, some anthropomorphic human, usually an older bearded white man up in heaven and humans down here on earth. The Unity cosmology is that the whole universe is one, totally interconnected. All that is God. God is omnipresent, everywhere, all the time. Everything in the universe, visible or invisible, is what we call God. We never have to make a long-distance phone call to God because God is here. God is everywhere, all the time. God is within us. God is all that there is. We live and breathe and have our being in God. So prayer is not an attempt to contact or manipulate God because there is no need to. God is the very essence of what we are and what everything is. Thus, in Unity, we believe that prayer is not for the purpose of trying to get some God out there to do anything. Prayer is not to change God's mind, but to change our own mind. That's the purpose of prayer. We don't pray to get God to do anything. We pray to realize that it's already been done for us. We have all the potential that we will ever need. Prayer is the means by which we appropriate what is always there, the all good, the perfection of the universe. Imagine that when you're thirsty, you grab your water bottle, you go to that new water fountain out there in our family room, and you fill your bottle. That's what prayer is. We don't have to beg that new water fountain out there to produce water like we did the old one. All we need to do is press our bottle to the lever and receive the water. That's exactly what prayer is. It's opening up to and receiving that which is already there, this perfect good. So we're not praying for anything other than our own ability to open up and receive what is there all the time, right now. We don't need to pray for anything any more than a fish needs to pray for water in the ocean, because we live in God just like the fish lives in the water. If we have trouble breathing, for example, we don't need to pray for more air. We need to pray that we can appropriate the air that is already there, everywhere, all the time. And that is what prayer is all about. Aligning ourselves with the cornucopia that is everywhere, all the time. But most people can't see it. Prayer is the process whereby we lift up our vision beyond the appearances of just this physical world to the reality of the whole world. Now, there are two ways of viewing the world. We can live life looking at the outer world and believing that that is the only reality. Many people do that. Most of mankind does that still. Or we can look to the inner world, which is far, far more powerful, because the inner world is what creates that reality out there. The world we see out there is the reflection of what is in us. If you don't believe that, allow yourself to change your attitude about something or some person, and then watch your outer world change. It's amazing. We can change the whole universe very easily simply by changing our way of looking at things. What's out there is a reflection of our own consciousness. We have the power to change the world. We have the power to change the universe, because we can change ourselves. Mankind is always one with God, but we have fallen asleep to that reality. Remember the story of Adam and Eve? God put Adam to sleep, and Adam, or mankind, has been trying to wake up ever since. Many people believe that's where the consciousness of mankind is right now. We're at a tipping point. We're at the point where many of us realize that it is time to wake up. We realize that there is something else, something so much more than the material plane. Plato talked about this at great length in his cave allegory some 2,500 years ago. Thank goodness many people are now willing to listen to Plato and Buddha and Jesus and so many others who have said, wake up. We're ready to walk out of the dark cave of shadows and look at the real world. And that's what prayer is all about. Prayer is the primary means by which we change the world, by changing ourselves. We all sometimes are tempted to pray for things or conditions to change. Sometimes there's a tendency to go to God with our fix-it list or our honey-do list. It may surprise you to hear this, but we never need to pray for any condition in the outer world to change. All we ever need to pray for is that we change our own consciousness. As we change our own consciousness, the conditions out there will change on their own. Think about it. When we pray for things and conditions and other people to change, we are praying for the effect to change. But if we don't change the cause, it's absolutely pointless. It's kind of like hitting ourselves on the head with a hammer and praying, please God, make the pain stop. Very often we pray for a healing, for an answer to our challenges, right? But we refuse to change our own consciousness. Then we say, God just hasn't answered my prayers. The only way to change anything is to change the cause. So the only true prayer is not to change something or some person, but to pray for awareness about why that thing or relationship isn't working. We need to pray to go beyond the limitations we have created for ourselves. We can pray to see how we are projecting fear and limitation and negativity onto the world and onto others. The truth is that it's the Father's good will to give you the kingdom. In psychological terms, that biblical quote means that the world is a banquet of opportunity when we align ourselves to see it. We simply need to pray to be able to see all of the opportunities and to accept them. That's a big one, to accept them. We just need to change our consciousness, and that is what prayer can do. There's a story about the old days and Silent Unity, and when Silent Unity was just starting. And they had financial problems from time to time. Someone once stood up at a meeting and suggested that they pray for their money to hold out. Then Myrtle Fillmore got up and said, no, we need to pray for our faith to hold out. And that's all we ever really need to pray for. Not that our money will hold out, but that our faith will hold out. Not that someone else will change, but that our love will expand to the point where we learn to accept that person. We need to pray for wisdom, faith, and joy. Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and all else will be added unto you. That is central prayer conditioning. Let's talk for a few minutes before we close about the how-to aspect of prayer. Let me share with you some thoughts that are just general guidelines and practical tools that can perhaps help you. First, choose a clean, quiet place to pray, a place where you will be undisturbed and free from distractions, preferably the same place and the same time every day. If the bathroom is the only place you can meet that criteria, go for it. I had to do that traveling with people one time. Worked great. Second, relax. Relax your body and your mind. Relaxing is very, very important. In our society, we want instant everything. We're always on the go, but there's no such thing as instant prayer. Then breathe slowly and breathe gently. There's a definite connection between our breath and our mental activity. Breathing. This helps communion with our inner self. In fact, anytime you feel tense, try closing your eyes and taking a deep breath. It's sometimes helpful to go over your whole body. Start with your feet and move up to your head and tell each part of your body to relax. Third step is forgiveness and letting go. Forgive yourself. Forgive others. Jesus said if you have any problem with your brother, get that taken care of first. Unforgiveness will block our connection with our inner self. So every time you pray, mentally first, go over your day and become aware of any unforgiveness, judgments, or resentment or anger that you're holding, and simply give it to Spirit. Just give it. I now let this go. Or if there's a problem you're wrestling with, let that go. Set it aside. Make sure to set aside anything that can create a block. Give it to Spirit. Simply sit down and ask Spirit to make you aware of any unforgiveness in your consciousness. And when that awareness comes, just give it over to Spirit. Not my will, but thine. The fourth step is to center on something. Focus your attention on something in particular. There are many different things that you can do here. If you're seeking guidance for something, then center yourself on the question. Hold the question in your mind as you center your attention on that particular question. Should I take this job or not? Should I buy this house or not? Hold the thought in your mind. Don't intellectualize about it, but simply ask the question and then stay with it. Another way is to make an affirmation, maybe from the Daily Word, or write down your own affirmation. If you're dealing with a health challenge, for example, you might say, I am whole and perfect right now. I am whole and perfect right now. Focus on something. It might even be your breathing, as the Buddhists do. Simply follow your breath, in and out. Chanting or mantras of any sort. Say Om if you're familiar with that. Use music if you can get something that touches you deeply. Any kind of mandala or picture or symbol is very good for focusing. Candle meditation is interesting too. If you've never done that, you might even try that. Put a lighted candle about 4 feet from you and focus on the flame while you're breathing. The thing that's important is to find something that you can center on that feels comfortable to you. The fifth step is really not a step at all. It's simply flowing with the experience, going to whatever you are experiencing. Don't look for anything. Don't judge anything. Don't really try to do anything. Simply experience whatever you're experiencing. Notice it. Simply observe it. The sixth step is that of thanksgiving and praise, that feeling of gratitude for all that you have. And the last step is a really important one, and that is to return and become grounded into the third dimension after prayer or meditation. Have you ever had the experience when you've been really deep in meditation that the person who was in charge guiding you brought you back too quickly? Or you're meditating and the phone rings and you have to get up and you spend the rest of the day kind of wondering who you are or what you're doing? It can happen because our normal awakened consciousness is focused on this three-dimensional world we live in, which is at a certain vibratory level. It's a lower vibratory level. When we meditate or pray, we are raising our awareness to a much higher rate of vibration. If we come back too quickly, we can really get out of kilter. So when you come back, give yourself time to get grounded. Wiggle your toes, wiggle your fingers, stretch your shoulders, whatever. Just move slowly. Allow yourself a few minutes to come back from prayer or meditation. You know, we can reach for the stars, but ultimately we have to come back and keep our feet on terra firma, on the ground. Otherwise, we can become real space cadets, and we just don't know what's going on sometimes. So, central prayer conditioning means to condition yourself, condition your life, your whole life with prayer. Central prayer conditioning means to make prayer the very center of your life. Bear in mind that the purpose of prayer, the purpose is for us to realize our oneness with Spirit, our oneness with all life, and then all else will be added to us. Prayer conditioning is realizing who we really are, one with the omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence of the universe. That's who you are. And so it is.